Controversial comedian and political commentator Bill Maher was recently interviewed by ESPN journalist Stephen A. Smith, and though both of them vented their frustrations with the Democratic Party and the broader left, Maher took the time to hit MAGA Republicans where it hurts by reminding them that their party is objectively worse by far. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at here from the most recent episode of the Stephen A. Smith Show on YouTube, which you should check out. Smith is an ESPN commentator. I know him also as Kevin Hart's frenemy. They have a really good back and forth that's like ongoing, this mock feud. But he's also been dabbling increasingly so in political commentary. Now, where he frustrates me is most of the time he seems to be knocking the Democratic Party, even though he self-identifies as a liberal. Bill Maher kind of does the same thing, and it's one of the reasons why Bill Maher sometimes gets on my nerves as well, also because Maher is too wrapped up in niche culture war issues for my liking. But, as I've told you before, where I give Maher a lot of credit is that despite that temptation, he always makes it very clear that he thinks the modern Republican Party is still objectively worse and objectively more dangerous than the Democratic Party, even if he thinks the Democratic Party's fringe is crazy. So with that in mind, this is what Bill Maher had to say to MAGA Republicans, just in case any of them thought that he was an ally.
Yes. I mean, that's, I think, what I always was and always will be. As I say in the special, the people who are saying, oh, you're a Republican now. No, I'm not a Republican, and I never will be a Republican for all the reasons I haven't been. They're too religious. They're fiscal hypocrites who think it's awful when America spends money it doesn't have, except when they're in office, and then it's always perfectly okay. They're in denial about racism. They're in denial about the environment. They're always blaming the underprivileged when they should be blaming the overprivileged. And then they added to that shitty mixtape, they don't believe in democracy anymore. And they threw their lot in with a sociopath named Donald Trump, who thinks that elections only count when they win. So they have a sizable lead in being the more threatening party, I think, to this country.
So there you go. Right. This helps me digest a lot of Bill Maher's other comments, which are really, really frustrating and suggest, that he's on the track to becoming, a both sides centrist. He just refuses to be. He may get wrapped up in niche culture war issues. He may be again, a bit too credulous with the benefit of the doubt at certain times, but I appreciate the fact that he refuses to pretend that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are equally good or equally bad. He just refuses to do that. And so kudos to him, because a lot of people in his position slip down that slippery slope, and Maher has maintained his purchase for years. So again, kudos to him. He also, later on in the conversation, took another shot at Donald Trump, while again, perhaps being a bit too credulous of Trump's inability to act on his threats. He does point out that Donald Trump's authoritarian impulses are very real, and even with previous presidents, he didn't have to consider it.
The people I could worry about would be Donald Trump. I mean, he does flirt with authoritarianism. There is no doubt about it. Do I think he's going to start arresting comedians? I really don't. But, he's talking about invading Greenland and annexing Canada. He says a lot of stuff, Stephen A. He really does. I don't think it's going to happen, but let me put it this way. Under George Bush or anybody else, it never even entered my mind. With Trump, anything's possible.
And what's interesting is, I found that particular comment so fascinating because, again, do I believe that on January 21st, the day after Trump is inaugurated, that he's going to be marching people into gulags? No, probably not. But again, the fact that it's, something that we have to even contemplate, or that it might come 2 years later, is truly disturbing. But what I found interesting about that was it was under President Bush, President George W. Bush, that Bill Maher's first show, Politically Incorrect, was canceled because Bill Maher criticized the Bush-era military post 9/11. And that was an example of conservative cancel culture, where conservatives were so pissed, how dare you criticize a Republican president and a Republican-led military after a domestic crisis, how dare you? And Bill Maher's show was canceled. The Dixie Chicks, now called the Chicks, a very popular country music act, they were also effectively canceled after they criticized President Bush as well. So cancel culture is rife in the Republican Party, has been rife on the right. They live and breathe censorship. They love to impose censorship and retribution in the marketplace of ideas against their political opponents. And anyone who tells you otherwise is just simply not true, because Maher himself was a victim of that. So I actually found it interesting that, he felt that in many ways Trump is worse, which he is. But you would think that Maher might even be tempted to create a false equivalence there, given that he was a victim of George W. Bush's cancel culture. So it's a really powerful point. I'm going to play you a couple more clips here in just a second in which Maher talks about Elon Musk. But while we're focusing on Trump and the Republican Party as a unit, going back to some of the things that Maher said at the beginning, they are fiscal hypocrites. They pretend to be fiscally conservative, but they certainly don't behave that way. Donald Trump added $8 trillion to the national debt during his 4 years in office. It's by far the greatest contribution by a sitting president in a single term. It's like 33% of the debt, standing debt, approximately that amount, was added on Trump's watch. It's a staggering sum, especially when he promised he would not only not add to the debt, he'd wipe out all the debt he'd inherited from President Obama on back. He deficit spent for years, even prior to COVID. So when people say, oh, it's because of COVID, no, that's bullshit. He was fiscally irresponsible by the conservative definition, even prior to COVID. I would also say, and this is where I wish Maher would spend more time on this, is for a guy who says he's really big into free speech, it's really dangerous that Donald Trump has been courting these social media titans like Elon Musk, yes, but also Mark Zuckerberg from Meta. And again, I've been banging this drum for the past few days, but not only have you had Zuckerberg make sweeping changes to Facebook and Instagram's moderation policies and content policies that are distinctly pro-Trump, removing fact checkers, relocating the moderation team from a blue state to a red state, donating $1 million to Donald Trump's inaugural fund, something Zuckerberg never did for a previous president. And then on top of it, you have Trump openly saying, yeah, the reason that Zuckerberg is doing this is because I have threatened him in the past. And those threats included life imprisonment. There is no Democratic analog to this. And it seems to be a disturbing normalization where people are barely commenting, not just on Zuckerberg's changes, but the fact that Trump himself publicly said he believes those changes are a direct consequence of the threats Trump has made against these people. Again, a new level of authoritarianism we've never seen before. So I wish more time would be spent on that. Here are a couple of clips from that same conversation, the topic turning to Elon Musk, our shadow president-elect. And I should say, because this is the predicate for Stephen A's question, is Maher has been very friendly towards Elon Musk in the past. And Maher's question is effectively, given that you have gone on the record saying how much you admire Elon Musk, are you not worried about the level of influence he has now?
Felt the way that you felt about him. What are your thoughts about him?
Well, I thought, first of all, it's kind of ironic, that the world's richest man and a former ex-president who is a billionaire won the election and really stuck it to the elitists, huh?
I think that that's a really funny observation to make as well. I think it's one definitely worth making. It cuts into the BS that, they're not at all the party of the underdog. You have a New York real estate billionaire who was president and is now about to be president again, and literally the world's richest man doing things that the right wing's, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about George Soros, for example, blowing those out of the water. Elon Musk is influencing the government in more overt, explicit, corrupt ways than anything we have ever seen from George Soros, Bill Gates, or other left-wing billionaires, Mark Cuban.
That's right.
But, look, I've criticized Elon where I think he was wrong or he wasn't being honest. I mean, Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Look, when he took over Twitter, it was way too left. I mean, that's why I stopped going on it. Because,
right.
As I used to say, anything I want to say on Twitter, I can't say on Twitter because you'd be immediately excoriated because it was politically incorrect. And it used to be, when it started, a fun place where you could just say funny things, and then it got to be a place where the woke took over and everything was just a minefield. And why put it out there just to get yourself into trouble? So I stopped
Hmm.
going there. And Elon said, well, when I take over, I'm going to make it an even playing field. I'm going to make it a place where the left and the right can both be. But he didn't. He just
He
completely
did not.
reversed it. And now it's just a place for
Hmm.
the right. So he didn't follow up on that. And I
Not only did he not follow up on it, again, we've seen studies which indicate that after Musk openly endorsed Trump in July of 2024, the engagement ratio, the disproportionate engagement for right wing accounts and Republican affiliated accounts just dwarfed engagement for left wing and Democratic leaning accounts in a way that many scholars believe can't possibly be organic. We also have heard reports that Musk will deliberately throttle tweets if he believes that a comparable tweet of his is not getting sufficient engagement. President Biden's Super Bowl 2024 tweet, I believe, is a good example of this. It got more engagement than Musk's. That pissed Musk off, and so he demanded, reportedly, that his tweet get greater engagement. So, yeah, he's just not a free speech warrior, even though he claims to be. He's a hypocrite. He is absolutely a hypocrite who will use his power and influence to suppress, to attack speech that he doesn't like. And Maher also points out in the same conversation that Elon lies a lot and he doesn't do a lot of research. So I like the fact that, again, despite my issues with Bill Maher, he does make a point of avoiding the false equivalence. He will call Elon Musk out. I wish he would call him out more aggressively. And he makes no bones about it. Donald Trump is an authoritarian, and the Republican Party is objectively worse than the Democratic Party on the Democratic Party's very worst day. So hopefully Bill Maher will continue that sort of energy and even increase it as we begin the second Trump term, but it remains to be seen. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.